Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something that seems so simple, but it's really not. The chocolate chip cookie.
Right.
I mean, if you've ever followed a recipe perfectly and then pulled out a batch of, flat, sad, crispy discs when you wanted chewy masterpieces,
Oh, we've all been there.
you know this is secretly a battlefield of chemistry.
It truly is. And our mission today is to cut through all that anecdotal advice and really zero in on the science.
The non-negotiables.
Exactly. The absolute scientific requirements for cookie perfection. We've got sources from the institutional classics like the Betty Crocker recipe, which has been optimized over 75 years.
75 years.
All the way to modern food science from places like Joy Food Sunshine and Modern Honey. We're looking for what separates the amateur from the master.
It's love that. Treating a cookie like a scientific challenge. It's funny, the basic recipe itself is like a little piece of American food history.
It is.
That Betty Crocker one, it was introduced on a radio show back in 1939. And then it was immortalized in their 1950 cookbook.
And you can see that history right in the ingredients list. Early on, a lot of people used shortening because it was cheaper.
More shelf-stable.
Right. Then margarine was huge in the 50s. But what decades of testing eventually proved, and what you see in all the modern recipes, is that for real flavor and structural integrity, there's just no replacement for pure butter.
That one lesson took decades to become the standard.
It really did.
Okay, let's start this chemistry experiment with the foundations. The simple ingredients, and I guess where the science of texture really begins.
We have to begin with sugar. It controls the entire texture profile.
Okay.
So most great recipes, they require a split between granulated sugar and brown sugar. Granulated is pretty straightforward. It's crystalline. It gives you sweetness, tenderness.
Pulse with the spread.
It does. But the chewiness, the thing everyone really judges a cookie on,
That's the brown sugar, right?
that is all brown sugar. It's just granulated sugar with molasses mixed in. And that molasses does three critical things.
Okay, what are they?
First, you get that rich, almost buttery flavor. Second, it holds onto moisture way better than white sugar. And third, it's a little bit acidic.
Ah, I'd know that.
And that moisture and acidity, that's what guarantees the final cookie stays soft and chewy. It fights off that crystallization that makes cookies crispy.
So if you just use white sugar, you'd end up with...
You'd get something much closer to a crispy sugar cookie, just with chocolate chips in it. It would spread a lot thinner, too.
So let's say I'm in a pinch. I'm out of brown sugar. You're saying the science demands I replace those three things. The moisture, the acid, and the flavor.
Absolutely. And you can. The quick DIY fix is actually really good. You just take 1 cup of granulated sugar and stir in 2 tablespoons of molasses.
And you've basically just made brown sugar.
You've just reintroduced everything you need for that structural chew.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Okay, now for the ingredient that causes, I think, the most arguments online. The butter. How softened should it really be?
The temperature of your butter is, well, it might be the single most critical factor for how your cookie turns out.
For the height and the spread.
Yes. It must be softened, not melted. Softened means like 68 to 70 degrees. You should be able to press your fingertip in and leave a little imprint, but the stick holds its shape.
I've made that mistake. Left it out all day in the summer, and it's just soup.
What's the actual problem with using melted butter?
When butter melts, you lose the crystalline structure of the fat. And that structure is what you need to trap air when you're creaming it with the sugar.
Oh, okay.
If you try to cream melted butter, you just can't get those air pockets. So the dough has no internal scaffolding. The second it hits the oven's heat, it just collapses into a greasy, flat disc.
So the golden rule is better to be a little too cool than even a little too warm.
Exactly. The sources are so firm on this. Always err on the side of slightly cooler butter.
Yeah.
If you're in a rush, you can use the microwave on a really low setting, like 20% power.
But you have to watch it like a hawk.
5-second bursts.
Sure.
The second you see it start to liquefy, you've gone too far. Okay, so fat temperature is mastered. The next big hurdle is measurement. I'm guessing flour is the main culprit here.
Flour is always the culprit, especially if you just scoop it from the bag.
Right.
If your dough feels really stiff and the cookies don't spread, you've packed too much flour in. If they spread into one giant cookie, you might have too little.
So what's the right way?
The unanimous advice is the dip and sweep method. You stir the flour in the canister first to, fluff it up.
Aerate it.
Then you gently spoon it into your measuring cup until it's overflowing a bit, and then you just level it off with a knife. No tapping and absolutely no packing it down.
That gives you the right hydration balance.
It does. And speaking of hydration, we should touch on the eggs. The Betty Crocker recipe landed on one large egg for a very specific reason.
The size matters.
The size absolutely matters. The egg adds richness, sure, but it's also the liquid you need to hydrate the starch in the flour.
And bind everything together.
Right. If you use a medium or a small egg, you haven't added enough liquid, the dough gets stiff, and your cookie will be dry and tough because the flour wasn't properly moistened.
Okay, so this is where we get to move beyond just the basics and into, like, intentionally changing the texture.
This is where it gets really interesting, yeah.
The difference between chewy and crispy, you're saying it's down to just a couple of powders.
The leavening agents. Baking soda and baking powder.
Right.
Baking soda is simple sodium bicarbonate. It needs an acid to react with.
Which in our cookie is the molasses from the brown sugar.
Exactly. They meet liquid and heat, release carbon dioxide, and you get lift and browning.
But a lot of modern recipes add baking powder too, even with the brown sugar. Why?
Because baking powder is what's called a double-acting agent, which sounds technical, but it's not.
Okay.
It just means it has the base, which is the baking soda, and the acid built right in, so it reacts once when it hits the wet ingredients.
And then again in the oven.
And again when it hits the heat. That second reaction gives you a really robust boost of rise. It makes for a thicker, softer cookie, even if your acid ratio is a little off.
And if my cookies are always flat, I should probably check the date on those.
Immediately. They lose their power surprisingly fast, like 6 to 12 months after you open them.
How can you test them?
It's easy. A little baking soda in vinegar or hot water should bubble like crazy. Baking powder in just hot water should do the same. If it's a sluggish fizz, toss it. Your cookies are doomed.
Okay, now for the ingredient that sounds like it doesn't belong. Cornstarch. Modern honey uses it, and I need to know why.
Cornstarch is the secret weapon for softness. It works in two ways. First, it's a starch that absorbs moisture, but it doesn't develop any gluten. So it binds with the butter and eggs and helps thicken the cookie without making it cakey. You get this incredibly tender, melt-in-your-mouth texture.
And what's the second way?
Crucially, it helps the finished cookie hold on to that moisture. It'll stay soft for days longer than a cookie without it.
So once we've got the softness locked in, we can literally dial in the chewiness just by changing the flour.
Exactly. You're just adjusting the protein content. If you want a nuttier flavor, you can swap a little bit of the all-purpose for whole wheat.
But for that dense bakery-style chew?
You swap 1 cup of all-purpose for 1 cup of bread flour. Bread flour has the highest protein, which means more gluten, which means a supremely chewy cookie.
And for a crispier cookie?
The opposite. The Betty Crocker tests showed you just reduce the all-purpose flour by about 1/4 cup, less structure, more spread, more crisp.
The ingredients are optimized. Now for technique. Creaming. We know we need soft butter, but how long do you really need to do it for?
People always rush creaming. It's the foundation of the texture. When you beat that soft fat and those sharp sugar crystals together, the crystals literally cut thousands of tiny air pockets into the butter.
You're building the scaffolding.
You are. And you need to beat it until it's visibly lighter in color and fluffy. That can take a full 4 minutes. If you stop at 2, you just haven't trapped enough air and your cookies will be dense.
Wow, 4 minutes. Okay, and after we've built that beautiful structure, we have to add the flour. And this is where tough cookies are born.
It is all about gluten. Gluten is protein. When flour gets wet and you mix it, those proteins form long, elastic strands.
Which is great for bread, not for cookies.
Not for cookies. If you overmix, those strands get too strong, too rigid, the cookie can't get tender, and you end up with something tough. The rule is simple. Stir in the dry stuff just until the flour vanishes.
And the chocolate chips last.
Always last. Mix for just a few seconds more, and that's it.
Now, the oven debate. We saw temperatures from 375 all the way up to 400. Why the split?
It's a great example of 2 different scientific paths to the same goal, a soft center. But first, rule number 1 is get an oven thermometer.
Because your oven lies.
Your oven can be off by 50 degrees. That is death for a cookie.
So why 400 degrees? That seems so hot. I think it would burn them.
The 400-degree philosophy is about speed. At that high heat, the outside of the cookie sets really fast.
Which stops it from spreading too much.
Right. By setting the structure early, the inside gets to that perfect gooey stage much faster, before the whole cookie has a chance to dry out.
That makes a lot of sense. And the traditional 375?
That's a slower, more gentle bake. It gives you a slightly bigger window to pull them out before they're overdone. It's probably more forgiving for a beginner.
Either way, center rack.
Always the center rack. It's the sweet spot for heat circulation.
And the pan you use matters almost as much as the recipe. You mentioned thermodynamics.
You have to. Think about color and heat. We use light-colored, heavy aluminum sheets because that shiny surface reflects heat evenly.
And a dark pan.
A thin, dark sheet absorbs and holds heat like crazy. You'll get burnt bottoms before the centers are even close to being done.
And always use parchment paper.
Always. It evens out the heat transfer, and you need to give the dough balls at least 2 inches of space to breathe.
Okay, the final golden rule for gooey cookies. Pull them out early.
This is the skill that separates the pros. You have to take them out when the edges are light golden brown, but the center still looks pale, soft, maybe even a little raw.
Trust your eyes, not the clock.
Exactly, because it's going to keep baking on that hot sheet for several critical minutes. That's what firms up the center without turning it into a rock.
And the cooling process is actually part of the baking process.
It is. You have to cool them on the baking sheet for 2 to 5 minutes. That lets the center set up. That's how you get chewy centers and crispy edges.
If you move them too soon, they just fall apart.
They'll collapse into a mess. Then you move them to a wire rack to cool completely so the bottoms don't get soggy.
So we've mastered the science. Now let's talk about the fun part, customization. How do we pick the right chocolate?
Well, the consensus is definitely semi-sweet, with milk chocolate as a close second. But if you want to elevate it, look beyond the chip shape. Okay. But good brands like Guittard or Ghirardelli are great, but for that incredible melt, get a high-quality chocolate bar and just chop it into chunks. The different sizes mean you get these decadent puddles of melted chocolate.
I love that. And for a crunch element.
Classic recipes go for walnuts or pecans, especially if you toast them a little first. But, I mean, a perfect cookie is so versatile. Crumble them into a parfait, make an ice cream sandwich.
Yes.
The possibilities are endless.
Okay, finally, we need to know how to make this perfection last. Best storage hacks.
For immediate gratification, an airtight container, room temp, up to 4 days. But the freezer is your best friend.
To the dough.
Especially for the dough. Scoop the dough into balls, freeze them on a sheet until they're hard, then just toss them into a freezer bag. They're good for up to 2 months.
Which means you're always 15 minutes away from a fresh-baked cookie.
Exactly.
And if I have those frozen dough balls, do I need to thaw them first?
You have 2 options. If you have time, let them sit out for 30 minutes, then bake normally at 375.
And the faster method.
The faster method is great if you want a really thick cookie. Put the frozen dough balls right on the sheet and put them in the oven while it preheats.
So from a cold start?
From a cold start.
Yeah.
But you bake a little lower and slower, so like 350 for about 15 minutes. The slow start prevents the outside from burning before the inside thaws.
Okay, so synthesizing all of this, what are the 3 ultimate takeaways for cookie success? The things you absolutely must do every time.
First, master the butter temperature, soften. With that fingerprint test, never melted. Second, measure your flour with the dip and sweep method. It controls everything.
And third?
And third, respect the oven environment. Center rack, light-colored pan, and the golden rule. Never, ever overbake. That soft center is not a mistake. It is an opportunity.
This deep dive really shows how technical baking is. It's chemistry, it's thermodynamics, it's gluten control. But what I loved is that all the sources reminded us that the whole point of a perfect cookie, it sort of transcends the science.
Indeed. I mean, the science is non-negotiable for success, but these recipes have lasted because they create something reliable, something comforting.
Right.
If you connect it to the bigger picture, the simple act of making and sharing something delicious that's tied to our sweetest memories, it proves that the best recipes are the ones that connect us to tradition and to each other.
Go bake something perfect for someone you cherish.